Hi everyone, my name is Phil and welcome to Phil Does 3D. I am a multimedia and 3D artist and I stream on Twitch weekdays from 5 PM Pacific time in the US, 12 PM in Australia and 1 AM in the UK. Hi Sniper Echo, good to see you. I hope you guys are well. Let's see. Let's start with a recap again of what we've been doing with our model and what we're going to be doing next. So again, we created our model in Max, 3D Studio Max, and textured it using using Mari by the Foundry. Then we brought it into Eon View and set up our materials. And then we started to create our environment, our 3D environment, using Eon View for the model. We just gradually built that up over time, remembering to use layers as I've explained to you guys during my streams. And then yesterday I was doing some final quality renders, View's final quality render. Last night I did some proper final quality renders, which are called broadcast quality renders in Eon View's program, just to confuse everybody even more. I did those last night, so that's our broadcast quality render of our environment, our main pulled back shot of the garden terrace. And like I was explaining yesterday, you see in the broadcast quality, I know it's going to be difficult to see on stream, but there was in the broadcast quality render here has cleaned up all the noise that I was seeing in the tree roots and also in the moss on the rock. Also any noise that was happening in the God rays has been cleaned up as well. So that's the advantage of going to a broadcast quality render as opposed to View's final quality render, because broadcast is higher than final. It will take twice as long, but this render still only took my PC about, well, I think it was probably about 45 minutes. Just shy of an hour, say 45 minutes to an hour. And this scene has nearly 3 billion polygons in it, so 3,000 million polygons. So that's, considering the amount of poly detail that the program has to work with, that's not bad for a render time. I don't suggest you go above broadcast quality when you're using Eon View, because if you go superior or ultra, which are the two above broadcast, you're going to start substantially increasing your render time, but not much better of an improvement in the final quality render anyway. So again, if you're using Eon View, use preview quality as you're setting your scene up. Use final quality to get a good idea of what the render will look like to make sure everything is correct. And then for your final render in broadcast quality. So this is our main scene, as I said, pulled back. It gives you a good idea of what we've done with the scene. The next images are going to be the 4 different close-up camera shots that I've rendered out of the model. Because while this makes a pretty picture, the whole point of me creating these scenes has been to sell the model, so I need to show close-up shots of the actual model itself for people so they can see exactly what it's like. And that's what these shots we'll be doing. Now again, these are not color corrected yet. That's what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to be going into Photoshop and doing color correction on all of these renders to make sure that they look as good as they possibly can. So we have first close-up here of one of the angel statues beside the stairs holding one of the lamps. So that gives people a good indication of what one of the statues are like and what the lamps are like. Then we have a pulled back slightly looking at the angel statue on the opposite side of the stairs. Again, that just gives everyone a bit of a wider view of the actual model and the texturing that's been done on the model. Then we have a close-up shot of the second angel, which is the one that's at the top of the terrace and pointing toward the dome here, the wrought iron dome. And it shows a bit of our flowering ivy that's growing as well. And then we have a statue, the same statue on the left-hand side, but looking at it from a slightly different angle and back towards the other direction. Again, we've got some of our God rays happening here. Again, it shows people the flowering ivy quite well, and also the texturing in the model. So they're the camera renders that we're going to be working with today in Photoshop to do color correction on. I showed you guys yesterday in View the settings you should use you should switch on in multipass to make sure that when you want to do color correction in Photoshop, you have everything ready to go and set up. I did that when I did these renders, so I think what we'll probably do now is we'll jump straight into Adobe Photoshop and start just doing a bit of color correction on bits and pieces of the image. I'll explain it as I go through it, but parts of the image, like say in this image here, this palm tree here in the corner, I'd like to do some color correction on it. These close-up shots are going to require less color correction than the wider shots, particularly the really wide environment shot here. That'll probably require the most color correction because it's generally the environment that I want to do color correction on. And when we're pulled right up to the model, there's less of the environment showing, so, but there's still bits and pieces we can color correct, and we'll be doing that today. We're also going to be doing depth of field in Photoshop. Like I explained to you guys, you can get View to automatically do depth of field when it does its render for you. It will really slow your render down, and you won't have any control over the depth of field, and I like to have a bit more control over my depth of field, so I always like to do it in Photoshop. The same thing with motion blur. If you're animating your camera, you can get View to automatically do motion blur for you. But again, I would always recommend doing it yourself in a program like After Effects if you needed motion blur. That's generally what I always tend to end up doing. And we're also going to be doing, so we're going to do individual color correction on parts of the image. We're going to be doing depth of field. I will be vignetting the edges to make it look a bit more like a real world camera. And then I'm going to be doing an overall color correction on the entire image, and I'll show you that at the end. So let's jump into Photoshop. There we are. Remember guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop into chat and ask me. If I can help, I'm quite happy to. I don't know everything, but if I do have the answer, I'm quite happy to try and help you. It doesn't have to be related to 3D in general. It can be related to anything regarding 3D artwork or artwork in general. Digital artwork, that is. Multimedia, photogrammetry, all those types of things. If you just want to pop into chat and say hi, that's cool. If you just want to watch, that's completely fine as well. Okay, let's open up an image here. Let's start with, considering I'm already in close-up camera 3 here, let's open up that. This is the close-up on the angel itself, the first angel. Now, this is the Photoshop file that View will save out for you when you do a render. It automatically, when you set up your multipass in View, will create a Photoshop file with all of these layers in it. And all of these layers are the object layers that, in View, they're called object layers. So you have layers for your garden terrace, the background, the path, the dirt terrace, everything you basically place in the scene, it will create a layer for, provided you turn that on in View before you do your render. And the very last layer it puts down will be the color image layer, the one that it rendered out. So you have layers for things like shadows, the diffuse, lighting, and the Z depth. Now the Z depth is going to be really important because that's what we're going to be using to do depth of field. So please always make sure if you want to do depth of field outside of View, you do make sure to render out the Z depth. It has things like the material colors as well. That's basically just the materials without any lighting applied to them. And I know it's hard to see because it's quite dark, but that's just the garden terrace on its own. It's probably easier for me to show you if I jump into the channels, because when View creates all of these object masks, it actually creates alpha masks in the channels for you. So for instance, the garden terrace, if I turn that on, you can see you have a really nice clean alpha map for just the garden terrace if you wanted to do any color correction on just that object. The same thing goes for the background. If you wanted to swap out your background, which I really don't suggest you do in Photoshop, always do it in View. That's an easy way to do it. But it's also an easy way to color correct the background that you have rendered from View if you wanted to. That's just a bit of a leaf showing in the corner. Most of these are going to be black because we're pulled right up on the model and none of these objects are showing in that render. I included them just because it was easy to include them. It's not a real big deal to have them there. If you don't have them there and you need something, then you're going to be in more trouble if you do have it there and you don't need it. So let's see, what are we going to start with here? Let's start with doing a bit of color correction, perhaps. Again, like I said, on these models where we're pulled up relatively close to the model, there's really not a lot of color correction we're going to need to do. We'll start with this one because, like I said, not a lot of color correction required, but it does require a depth of field, so maybe we should start by doing a depth of field first. So in order to do a depth of field, go down to the bottom of your stack where you're going to find your color image. Actually, just before we do that, I'm going to jump up to my Z depth and turn that on and talk about that briefly. Now, when Vue does a render of its Z depth, it generally renders it differently to programs like V-Ray. In V-Ray, for instance, the further away an object is, the darker it is, and the closer to you it is, the lighter it is. Now you notice in Vue here, its Z depth is the opposite to that. The closer the object is, the darker it is, and the further away, the lighter. I prefer, because I do work in V-Ray when I do work for the studio, I'm used to working from black to light, so black in the background, white in the foreground for my Z depth. I don't know why Vue does it backwards. Ask Eon Software, the makers of the software. It's easy enough to fix though. So the first thing I would suggest you do with your Z depth pass is go Image, Adjustments, and do an invert. Okay, now once you've done an inversion of the image, you do want to open up your layers. Now you can do it a few ways. Let's use, not layers, sorry, levels. Let's throw a levels on here at the top so that we can remove it if we want to. If you actually don't use the adjustment stack here and you just go image adjustment levels, the only way to undo that is to actually go edit undo. But this way we can just turn that layer off to undo the levels if we want. So throw a levels on in your adjustment stack, and you see your histogram here. It's most of the information for the image is actually right down the end here. There's virtually nothing down this end of the scale. So we're going to want to pull our levels all the way down until we get the background showing up as more of a black. Don't go beyond your histogram there. Don't go beyond that point, because then you'll start losing information. So pull the black level down all the way to the start of that histogram. And you'll notice in the background it's probably harder for you on stream because my streams, Twitch generally, when you watch a stream, shows up a bit darker than what it does for me. And I'm using a 10-bit palette here, a 10-bit panel for my monitor. So I can see some banding in the background here. I don't want that. So I'm going to move the middle slider down until I remove that banding I see in the background. Just like that. So now on my monitor I've got a completely black background, and that's what you're going for. Try to avoid any banding of grayscale happening in the background here. Pull that down until you get a black background. And then your Z depth here should be good to go. Okay. So we have our Z depth inverted, and we've done our levels on it so that the colors are correct, or the levels are correct for the Z depth. Now I'm going to select all and copy my Z depth here. I'm going to turn them off and go back to my color channel. Select your color channel. Now you want to go to image, layer mask, and do a reveal all. Once you've done that, you want to jump into your channel, and you'll see it's created layer mask 0. Turn that on and paste that Z depth that we just copied. Okay, so just to repeat, we copy our Z channel from up here. We go reveal, we create a reveal all layer mask. Then we go into our channel, to that layer mask, and we paste in the Z depth that we copied. You can turn it off then once you've copied it in. So now what we want to do is we're going to make a duplicate of our main color layer here. So I'm just going to drag that down and make a copy of it. I'm going to delete that copy of that layer mask though from the bottom, because we don't want that. We only want one at the top. And hopefully you can see that just underneath my audio thing going there in the corner. I'm just going to delete that bottom layer mask. Don't click apply, always click delete. So we're back to our original color image at the bottom, and we have our color image and our Z depth mask here on that top layer. So you want to select the top layer with the mask here that you've just created, and you want to go into filter, blur, and do a lens blur. Now you want to turn preview on, turn it on and off to get an idea of what your depth of field is going to look like. But always make sure here under depth map, layer mask is selected. So you'll probably have a few things in your scene here, but always make sure that you select layer mask. They're all the object masks that View created for our file, but we want to select layer mask. Now, the blur focal distance allows you to choose which part of the image you want to be blurred and which parts you want to be clear. At the moment, you can see our entire image is quite blurred. So let's pull this back a bit and see what it does. Starting to come clearer. The blur is really, I really over accentuated the blur so that you guys can see it on stream more easily. You would never have your blur up 35, but I'm going to leave it there just for the moment to show you guys how you can adjust which part of the image you want in focus and which part you don't. You see, the further we pull it back, the more in focus the angel becomes, and the background stays out of focus. I'm going to keep pulling it down, down, until you get to a point basically where you're not blurring any of the background image. If it's too far, if the radius, I'm hitting the wrong one, I always do that. Not the radius here, you want to hit the blur focal distance, that's the one we're working with. You keep pulling it down until you get the part of the image in focus that you want and the part still blurred that you want. You see, as I pull it further down, the angel becomes more in focus and the background stays blurred. The opposite will happen when we go right to the top, it'll blur all of the image. So we're basically, our focal point is going to be that angel holding the urn here in the foreground. So we're going to pull our blur focal distance down until we get her in focus and the background still blurred. Okay, now if you want to check what it's doing, you can turn on and off the preview button here, and that will disable the effect for you, the depth of field. So you can just flick between them to see exactly what the depth of field is doing. And you can see basically, if you look in the background around the dome and the background itself, you can see the depth of field kicking in much more easily. Less on the angel because she's closer to the camera. As I turn it on and off. Now, it's less obvious on this image. If you have things in the foreground though, when we do a depth of field on our pulled back environment of the garden terrace, it'll be easier to see then, but anything in the foreground will blur as well. So you've really got to play with your blur focal distance to get the exact object you want to be in focus. Because not only will it blur the background, it will also blur anything in the foreground. So let's have a look here. I'm going to pull my blur focal distance down a bit more. Maybe pull it up a bit. Yeah, no, I want to pull it back. Back a little bit more. Okay. Now I'm just going to turn it on and off so I can check what it's doing. Now that blur is too extreme. You would never do a depth of field with a blur like that. Like I said, I have it turned right up to illustrate to you guys easily on the stream that are watching what's going on. But I'm going to pull that back now, and you do that by the radius here. You generally really don't want to go too high. Again, I'm going to keep turning on and off the preview button to get an idea of what sort of blur is going on in the background. You'll notice too that there's less blur happening in the background on that column than there is on that column. That's the depth of field. So as I turn it on and off, if you look at that column and then you look at that column and compare the blurriness to the two, you'll see this one's slightly in more focus than the one in the background. Now again, I'm just going to turn this on and off and check the blur in the background. And I do that, I keep turning it on and off and checking, because as I turn it on and off, I'm looking at different parts of the image. So I'm not turning it on and off and constantly looking here. I'm looking here, turning it on and off, looking here, over here. So I'm engaging it against all different parts of the image. Might pull it back just a little bit more. So instead of being at 18, I think I'll go to 15 for my radius for my blur. And these values are going to change depending on the image that you're actually doing a depth of field on. So I generally probably won't be using 15 for all my renders. It really depends on the image itself. That's why you can never, I can't say to you guys always use 15, because it's really going to be dependent on your image. I can just give you an idea of what to look for, and you want to blur up the background slightly, but not too much. Not unless that's the look you're going for, but generally you wouldn't want to blur it too much. I may even pull that back to 10. Remember guys, less is more, don't go overboard. And 10 will be fine, I think, for what we want. Yep. The only other thing I didn't talk about here was noise. Now, if I pull the noise value up, basically it's going to add noise through our image. So if I make it really extreme, you see what it's doing. Hopefully you can see it on stream. It's adding all this noise into our image. Now, noise can be useful to fake realism, because generally you're going to have noise in an image. If you take a photograph, generally there will be some noise in the image. Even film, you can get noise, and they put noise in images or in film to actually to make it look more realistic. You'd never use noise like that though, because that's really over the top. But adding a small amount of noise to your image can really help sell the believability of it. Make it look less like a render and more like a photo. But again, like I said, you really don't want to go overboard. If you're one of those people that likes a really crisp looking image, don't add the noise, but adding a little bit of noise can really help to add to the realism of the photo, of the render. Again, I might pull my noise up to about 10, I think. I'm just going to turn preview on and off and check that. I know it's going to be really hard for you guys on stream to see it because it is a really subtle effect. But it is there, trust me. What I might do for you guys is, because we're coming to the end of this project, once the images are rendered up and done, you'll be able to see them on the stores where I sell this model, but I may put it on Imager or something so you guys can check them out in more detail than what you can see on stream. So anyway, we're going to leave our noise at 10. Hey Alchemist, how are you? Good to see you. We're going to leave our noise here at 10. Our blur focal distance at 10, our radius at 10, and our noise at 10. That's just a happy coincidence there. The iris, that's just, if you had specular highlights or anything in your image, the shape of the iris would just be the shape that is being simulated with the depth of field. So I generally always leave that on octagon, which is 8-sided. I never change anything to do with my specular highlights here. You can play around with that if you like, but I generally leave it on the default settings. So really for depth of field, all I ever really change is the blur focal distance, the radius, and the noise. So again, let's just turn off the preview and have a look at, make sure my depth of field is correct. I'm very good, thank you, Alchemist. Thanks for asking. And it's good to see you. Thanks for popping in. Just my radius here, I'm just going to pop it back up to 15 and compare that. Yes, it is post-production, Alchemist, that's what we're doing today. We're going to be doing some color correction on the rendered images that we created when we made when I rendered up that garden terrace in Eon View. I created 5 cameras, 5 different renders. One is 4 of them are close-up shots of the model, and one is pulled right back to see the environment. We're going to be color correcting them today and doing some depth of field and vignetting and stuff like that. Yeah, for this image, I'm actually going to turn the depth of field, the radius up to 15. So again, that's with depth of field turned on. That's with it turned off. So I'm happy with that image the way it looks at the moment. So I'm going to go OK. Now you're going to find when we jump back in here, that the effect has completely disappeared. Now that's normal. You want to select the Z depth here that we added in the layer mask, and you want to delete it now. You don't want to hit apply though, you want to hit delete, and that will add our depth of field back. So to show you the depth of field is actually on, it is there. It's subtle, but it's there. I'm going to turn it off and you're going to see the original image and the depth of field image. And the easiest way to spot it's probably going to be to look at that column in the background. So that's with depth of field on, and that's with it off. You can notice it a bit too in the background itself, the tree in the background. So off and on. It's subtle, but it's there. You don't really want to go overboard with depth of field. It can be easy to get carried away with it, and that's not a good thing to do. So now post-production, anything else I want to do on this? Apart from doing a vignette and a general overall color correction, which I'm going to do after I've done color correction on the other 4 images. We'll do the overall color correction on all of them at the same time. But until then, I'm just looking to see if there's anything else I want to color correct. Now, I'm just going to rename my layer here depth of field. Remember, good housekeeping, guys. It's always should make sure that you're naming your layers correctly. It makes it much easier to find something if you want to change it later on. We're really done with our depth of field pass now. I'm not going to be using the shadows or anything. There's no need in this image. And like I said, most of the objects that we have object masks for here are for the environment, which you don't really see in this close-up, so that's not really going to be necessary. I may do an adjustment to the brightness and contrast, and I'm going to do it in the adjustment stack here as opposed to going again through image adjustments and doing it there, because it's the same thing that I showed you with the levels up here. If you don't want it, you can easily turn it off. So it's always better to work in your adjustment layer here than through the image adjustment. So let's make sure our depth of field layer is selected, and I'm going to do a brightness and contrast adjustment here. And again, I'm going to pull the contrast down to about 30. And my brightness at 20. This is, again, it's all going to be specific for whatever image you're working on, whatever camera we're working with. I just wanted to make the image a little darker, have the angel stand out a little better. And like I said, we are going to be doing an overall color adjustment, doing vignetting on the image, but we're going to do that after I've made adjustments to all the other images. So let's open up another one of our images here. Because remember, I said I wanted to work on them all at the same time, and that's what I'm going to be doing. Let's go with close-up camera 2. And this is another render of pulled quite close to the model. Again, we're not seeing huge amounts of the environment, so there won't be a huge amount of color correction, individual color correction that we're going to be doing here. But we are going to start again with our depth of field. So again, turn on your depth of field layer. Again, you want to invert the depth of field because View does it backwards for some reason. You're going to throw down a levels. We're going to pull it in. Make sure you never go past that mark though where you see a histogram. And we're going to, like I said, I can see banding happening in the background. I don't know if it's showing up on stream, but it's there. I don't want that. I want to make the background as close to black as I can get it. So I'm going to pull back on this middle slider until I get a relatively black background. Now we want to select all of our Z depth and copy it. Select our color channel down the bottom here. Make sure you turn off your Z depth and the levels, otherwise you won't be able to see it. Go to our color channel. Again, we're going to go layer, layer mask, and a reveal all. Jump into our channels. See our layer mask layer there. You want to select that and Control V to copy the, did I not? Looks like I may not have copied my Z depth. So Control C to copy. Back down to our color image at the bottom, back into our channel. We're going to paste it in. Once you've pasted it in, you can turn it off here and jump back to the RGB. So now we have our Z depth again copied into our color channel here. Now we're going to go to our filter. Before we do that, we're going to duplicate that channel again. So just drag it down to make a duplicate copy. And again, we're going to delete our Z depth from the copy at the bottom. Jump into our top copy. Now we're going to go filter, blur, lens blur. And again, we're going to start playing with our values a bit till we get the right depth of field that we want. Now, if it's difficult for you to see what is becoming focused and what isn't for your depth of field, just turn your radius right up, just in the interim, so you can get a better idea of what's going on. That'll visually show you. See, at the moment you can see that our flowers are in focus, but the angel and the dome in the background aren't. So just turning up your radius while you're working on focusing the camera in the depth of field really will help you work out exactly where you are. So now we can go back to our blur focal distance and keep moving it till we get what we want in focus. Now we're going too high there, so I want to start pulling it back. She's still blurred and I want to get her in focus a bit more, so I'm going to keep pulling it back. Still keep pulling it back. Back. All the way back, I think. Okay. You want to make sure you don't have invert turned on. I didn't realize I had that turned on. That's going to invert your your Z depth map back to the way it was from view, which is inverted to begin with. So turn off invert. Okay. That was my mistake, guys. If you don't want to do an inversion in Photoshop, by all means you can turn invert on, but I always prefer to do the inversion on that depth of field in Photoshop than turning that on. So let's keep going and try again now. I'm pulling it up until I start to see what I want to come into focus. Now you see the angels in focus here, but the background is starting to become out of focus the higher up I go. Now if I go too high, the angel here starts to become out of focus, and I don't want that. I don't want the focal point of this image to be these flowers necessarily. I really want it to be more the angel. So I'm going to start pulling it back. I'm going to keep pulling it back until she starts to go out of focus. Or this starts to become in focus too much. Because you'll notice here that the foreground flowers starting to become out of focus. That column and that angel statue are coming in focus, but the background of that dome is still out of focus. Thanks, Sniper Echo. It'll look better once we do our final color correction. Like I said, that'll be after I've done these adjustments to all of the individual images, and we're going to do a final color correction on all the images. I'll show you that though once we're finished doing our depth of field and our object color correction on the individual objects. Now, so I don't want to pull it too far back because that's starting to bring that's bringing the dome in the background into focus, but bringing the angel and the flowers in the foreground out of focus. So you just got to play around with it until you get it to look the way you want. Okay, now I'd like to have this foreground column here on the dome a little bit more in focus. So I'm going to start pulling it back a little bit. And you see that column starts to become in focus, but these background columns are staying out of focus. I don't mind a bit of blurring happening on our flowers in the foreground because it's really this angel and part of the dome here that I'm more concerned with having as my focal point in this image. So I'm going to keep pulling it back until I get it just the way I want. And that to me looks good. You see that our flowers in the foreground, and this is a good example of how that slider can affect your foreground objects as well as your background objects. We have our ivy flowers in the foreground slightly out of focus. We've got our angel statue and that column in focus, but we've still got our background columns out of focus. And that's the sort of depth of field effect I'm looking for. I'm going to pull back on my radius though a bit. And again, and this is a good example of using different radius values depending on the image. Because remember the last image it was 15. We may go over that last image again because I think I had the invert on that one as well. Because this dialogue in Photoshop, the lens effect will remember whatever you set last time you used it. So that's looking okay. So we're at a value of about 35 for this image. So again, we have our flowers slightly out of focus, our angel statue and our first front column here in focus, and then the background columns out of focus. We'll go okay for that. Now again, you'll see that you can't see what's happened. It's sort of like, looks like it's turned it off or it hasn't done it. All you need to do is select that the Z-depth mask here and delete it. Delete, not apply, always delete. Now it's come into focus. Now if I turn it off, you can see that's our original image. And that's our depth of field image. It's probably easier to see if you look at the columns in the background here. That's depth of field off. That's depth of field on. You'll notice it a bit too on the flowers in the foreground. So depth of field off, depth of field on. Like I said, you want it to be subtle. You don't want to go nuts with it. But it just helps to focus your eye on whatever part of the image you think is important in your render. So now we've done this one, let's jump back to this one because that invert thing, that was incorrect. I'm just going to turn off my levels here. And this is again an advantage of doing it as an adjustment layer. I can turn it off and on as I need it. So I'm going to turn it off. Go back to our original image. And we're just going to do it again. So I'm going to delete that depth of field we created. We're back to our original image. We're going to turn our depth of field back on, turn our levels back on to invert it. Control A, Control C to copy, turn them off. Jump back to our color image. Layer mask, reveal all. Go into our channel, into our layer mask. Control V to copy that Z depth pass in. Turn that off, go back to our RGB. Again, we're going to make a copy, a duplicate of that color layer.